And so, Jared, come on up, and I'll give the rest to you. So,
all right, thank you so much. I was going to say good morning, because I'm used to coming up and good morning, but I think it's, let's do good evening. All right, well, it's a pleasure to be here in Perham. We were coming close. My wife looked at the GPS, and she goes, oh, we're coming up to Perham. And I said, I'm pretty sure it's Perham. Is that correct? Hey, so right off the bat, a huge thank you to all of you for being here. And I just want to bless you because I have the privilege of traveling around and meeting many wonderful pastors, many wonderful Christians. And I just want to bless you guys because there's something special about this church. There are churches that have pastors that are great guys who do it because, you know, it's a job and they enjoy it. And maybe it's somewhat of a calling, but then there are the men who they want to follow Jesus. They want to bring the kingdom of God on this earth. And it's not what they do, it's who they are. It's part of their DNA. And I'm convinced in Pastor Jason, Pastor Sue, that's what this church has. And so there's something really special going on here. And very, very honored that we get to be a part of it. We're going to be talking about worldview today. And just how huge that is. And we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. I was afraid the lesson was going to be too long, but Pastor Stu reminded me that we can't eat pizza until I'm done. And so he said, they'll stay. They'll stay as long as it takes. So just keep in mind, when you think about getting up and walking out, if you leave, there's no pizza for you, okay? Stu's watching, and he's not going to give you pizza if you leave. But if we could go to the next slide, I just want to introduce you to my family. This is going to be my beautiful wife, Amy, there. That's Abraham. He was only 3 weeks old when we took that. This was right before we left on our trip. We've been on the road about 3 weeks now. We have a couple weeks to go. And God has blessed us with 5 sons and 4 daughters, which is much more than we deserve. And God has a sense of humor. When I met my beautiful wife, she said she didn't want any children. And God's just up there saying, oh, the plans I have for you, right? Plans to prosper you. So this is our greatest inheritance. We love you, but these guys right here are our greatest disciples. They're our greatest treasure, and we believe that God is calling Christians into multi-generational faithfulness. What that means is that it's not just about you and me, but what we do when we follow God and what we do in the home, which we're not going to talk about that much tonight, but we're going to really, that's what tomorrow's going to be all about. What we do in the home is going to have results with people that we'll never meet because they're going to be here long after we're gone. So when I look at my daughter Ivy, I don't just see a beautiful 11-year-old girl. I see a woman who's going to be a grandmother and a great-grandmother one day who will train her children in the ways of God. And so there's beautiful opportunities. So I just want to introduce you to my family. If we could go to the next slide. We have a radio show. It's called the Blessed Family Radio Show. And if you're ever in the 5-mile radius of Marble Falls, Texas, on 101.9 FM, you can hear that. Otherwise, you can go to our website and you can go to the podcast. We're on Spreaker, iTunes, and you can download that. We have about 50 shows so far, and every once in a while I get to have my wife on the show, and that's a real treat. But we have a lot of fun, and we get to interview people. But what we do on the show is we talk about things that most people aren't talking about, obviously with the title in regard to family. We are convinced that family is one of the great omissions in our society and unfortunately very often in the church today. The reason it's one of the great omissions is because Satan is scared to death of the biblical family. Family done God's way is supernatural. It's powerful. Satan can't touch it. And so that's a huge part of our hearts that we'll touch on tomorrow. If we go to the next slide. Hey, we're going to be coming back here. If you look at the bottom, we're going to be at the Mache Conference in April. And I'm not sure where it's going to be. And even if I knew where it's going to be, I don't know my North Dakota, sorry. That's next week. My Minnesota, I really love you guys, and I know where I am. My Minnesota geography that well. We're also going to be up in North Dakota in February in Bismarck. So if you want to come out, I tried to get them to reschedule. They wouldn't budge. So I said, man, May, June, July, August, that'd be perfect. So we would love to see if you can make it out to that. All right, next slide. Okay, worldview. We're going to jump into worldview. What is worldview? Worldview is a filter by which you understand all things. Worldview are the glasses you put on that you don't know you put on. Everyone has a worldview, It dictates how you live. I mean, everything. When you ask someone a question, they will answer, and they'll answer without even realizing why they're answering the way they are. It's because of the worldview. And the challenge here at the bottom is, excuse me, every worldview should be self-confirming and self-coherent. And those are kind of some big tricky words. What that means is worldview should make sense. And I'm going to show you how the worldview of those who reject God doesn't make sense. They say there is no God, but then they live in a Christian worldview, because a Christian worldview is the only thing that can make sense, because without a Christian worldview, there's no purpose, there's no meaning. It's a big deal. I'm convinced one of the things we're lacking, and I'll be the first to plead guilty, one of the things we're lacking in the church today is the ability to think. We don't know how to think. You say, well, of course, I can think, and I was talking to Lincoln. Lincoln plays the drums, is that correct? Okay, so I was talking to Lincoln today about this idea of knowing how to think, and I said, so you play the drums? He goes, yeah. I said, do you think I can play the drums? I'm not sure. Well, I could. I mean, right now I could waste our time. I could go over there and grab a stick and go bam, 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 and I would be playing the drums. Everyone in here could go up and beat on that drum, but if you're anything like me, you probably can't play the drums. Do you see the difference? All of us think, but we need to learn how to think, and I hope that makes sense. We need to learn how to think the way God wants us to. The tricky thing about the enemy is the great, what do we call him? The Great Deceiver. Follow this, it's huge. The tricky thing about being deceived is, by definition, you don't know it. When you're deceived, you don't know it. And some people, those dots don't connect, because I'll say that, and after the talk, they come up and go, Jared, thank you for sharing about Satan being the great deceiver. I'm just glad I'm not deceived. And I say, no, brother, you don't get it. When you're deceived, you don't know it. And they go, well, yeah, I know. I'm just glad I'm not deceived. And it's like, they just don't get it. I can guarantee you I am deceived at some level. I don't know where, because if I find out, and this is kind of the Christian life, as God, by his grace, unveils the levels of deception, we have the choice to believe and repent. See, you just don't believe and repent. This is my personal conviction. You don't just believe and repent when you first come to Christ. Daily, you have the opportunity, this is what sanctification is, of believing and repenting. So God comes and he says, Jared, you've been thinking wrongly about this. He takes off the veil, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I was talking to Pastor Jason today that it's crazy, because when God opens your eyes to something, you wonder, how did I never see that before? Right? You're like, wow, how did I never see that before? But once he shows you, you can either stay the way you were going, or you can do what the word repent means. You can turn and say, I'm going to believe the word that God has revealed to me in his word, and I'm going to change. And that's learning how to think. That's the Christian life. So we're going to be talking about worldview. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm seeing now, and it's fine, we'll just run with it, but usually these come up, so some of these slides, the answer is going to come up before I ask the question, so you're not allowed to look ahead on the slide and read the answer. You just have to look at what I want you to look at, okay? You guys are great, and you'll do a great job. Okay, so a worldview shows us what is right and wrong. And not only that, but it even asks the question, by whose authority, is there such a thing as right and wrong? Guess what? That's a serious conversation people are having today. People who have lots of letters behind their name. People who are, very, very schooled. And it's funny, I like to kind of use that word and say, well, they've been schooled. Does that make sense? They've been schooled. They've been tricked. People who, is there such a thing as right and wrong? By whose authority do we decide what is right and wrong? And so there's some things here. For instance, the man in the top right. Was he right? Was he wrong? Does it depend on your perspective? How do we determine? How can we objectively say he was right or he was wrong? This is all about worldview. Or that flag right there, which is a symbol on the top left that has been hijacked by those who reject God, which now stands for homosexuality. What do you think? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it indifferent? How can anyone say so? This is all worldview. All of the gender confusion. Hey, let me ask you a question. Does Satan have his crosshairs aimed at gender in this nation? What do you think? Big time. Why? Oh, hey, he's fixing it. Go for it. I'll give him time. Okay, so does Satan have his crosshairs aimed on gender? Yes. Once again, why? Because he knows how powerful it is. Gender is powerful. Gender is incredible. There's a talk we have that I think you can download the audio for free on our website. It's called Why Gender is Paramount. And we talk about the reality that gender is a Genesis 1 creation. I'm a passionate fan of Genesis chapter 1, and sometimes people come to me and say, Jared, what's the big deal? How come you harp on Genesis chapter 1? Who cares how long it took God and the days and this and that? Friends, it's a big deal, but it's not just about creation. In Genesis chapter 1, let me show you what's there. Not just creation, but 5 things. Marriage defined, gender defined, our identity, being made in God's image, which is the sanctity of life, defined, our purpose to have dominion with God defined, and the first command to be fruitful and multiply, which shows us that children are a blessing. You think Genesis is a big deal? We are the first society. There's been crazy stuff since the fall, Noah's time, Sodom and Gomorrah, but we are the first society I've found in the history of the world that has attempted to redefine marriage and gender, and it's happened in my 15-year-old son's lifetime. We've lost our ability to think. And don't think for 1 minute that we as Christians are immune to the toxins of postmodern thought. We aren't. And I'm convinced if we are not proactively training and battling and striving to learn how to think, we will by default be sucked into, at some level, the ways of this world. Would you agree with that? And that's why we're here, okay? All right, brother, what's the status? Hey, it's okay if you just leave it all up. It's okay. It'll work. All right, so at the bottom right, I think it was the Constitution. Once again, what do we think about that? What do we think about the founding of this country? Every topic you can throw on the table, how you see that. Have you ever been looking at the same thing? Okay, here's a great example. A dinosaur fossil. One man looks at it and says, this is 100 million years old. Another man takes it and says, this was probably deposited 4,000 years ago in the time of Noah's flood. Have you ever looked at something and someone else looks at it and you come to 2 completely different results? Why? It's because of worldview. Okay, because of worldview. All right, brother, are we able to go to the next slide? All right, let's hit it. Take your time. Don't forget about the pizza. Rebuke it. Exorcise the demon, brother. Let me go on while we're working on that. When do you begin to learn worldview? When do you begin to train in worldview? It's from the womb. Did you know they say by the time a child is 7, their worldview is primarily established? Think about that. You know, the ministry we have with our children, which is by and large inculcated in the home, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And so this isn't just for adults. This is for children. And for the young people here, please pay attention to this presentation. It's huge. Okay, let's talk about the battle of the worldviews. This is what we're going to do. We're going to compare the Christian worldview with the atheist/evolutionary worldview. And we're going to ask 4 questions, and I want to ask you to try to remember these 4 questions. Each of them have one word attached to them. So let's go to the next slide if we could. Oh, real important point. You can be a good church-going person and yet at the same time live according to a very evolutionary worldview. I want to just inform you, unfortunately, that there are many wonderful Christian born-again people who are living much of their lives like evolutionists. And I'm going to prove that to you. And it's a big deal. We need to learn how to think. We need to be, what does the scripture say? Let's go to the Word of God. It says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. See, when we come to Christ, Christ gives us a new spirit. But then it's a process. This is where the battle is. It's a process of getting this renewed into the image of God and His kingdom. And that takes effort. It takes time. It takes prayer and fasting. It takes humbling ourselves to God and saying, God, I don't yet know what I need to know. Hey, friends, guess what? I don't yet know what I need to know. And with all love and humility, I'm going to throw you under the bus with me. You don't yet know fully what you need to know either, even though there's people in here much wiser than I. God knows. And we need to be lifelong learners. That's what the word disciple means. Okay, so let's go to the next slide if we could. All right, so here are the 4 questions, and they're those 4 words up there: origins, meaning, morality, and destiny. I learned this from a wonderful gentleman named Ravi Zacharias. Okay, origins, meaning, morality, and destiny. Origins, where did I come from? Meaning, what is the purpose of life? Morality, what does it mean to be good? Destiny, what is going to happen after I die? For someone to have a worldview that is worthy to follow, not only do they have to answer these questions, but like I said, they need to be self-coherent, meaning they fit. They can't contradict. And I'm going to show you how the Christian worldview fits perfectly. It makes all the sense in the world. The evolutionary worldview makes no sense at all. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. Okay, so let's go to the next slide if we could, and let's look at the Christian worldview. First, where did I come from? Well, God made me, and he made all things. Reminds me of, I have a catechism that I'm teaching Ivy and Jedediah, my 11-year-old daughter and my almost 10-year-old son, and the first question is, who made you? And they say, God made me. And I say, what else did God make? And they say, God made all things. And then I say, why did God make you in all things? She's being shy. For his glory. And it goes on. But yes, this is where it starts from. What are our origins? In the beginning, God created. There are people who use the expression New Testament Christians, and I'm not judging them, but it's not just the New Testament. I mean, it's a new covenant, but we need, in the beginning, God created. Creator is huge. That's where the gospel begins. That's where the good news begins, is that in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and he created the heavens and the earth. So where did we come from? God made us, and he made all things. Okay, what is the purpose of life? Well, since, and this is where it follows, since God made me, and he made all things, the only purpose that flows from that God gives us in his word, which is coherent, makes sense, is that we are here to glorify the Creator by obedience to his word. Does that make sense? God made me, therefore I am not his. The Westminster Shorter Catechism, the first question is, what is the chief end of man? The answer is, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. We are here. Hey, guess what? Newsflash. The purpose of life is not our personal happiness, even though there's great joy in following Christ. But you know what's crazy? When you look in this book, the people who are successful in this book, they weren't people who revolved their lives around themselves. Because guess what? It's funny, Pastor Jason and I were talking about this earlier today. I can remember we were going through a circumstance as a family. It was very difficult. And I cried out to God one day, and I said, God, this is hard. This is really hard. And it was as if he said back to me, and your point is? Welcome to my kingdom. You know, and he's a loving God, but read Hebrews chapter 11 and ask yourself, which one of those heroes of faith had it easy? It's hard. Christ said the narrow path is hard, but friends, it's worth it. Amen? It's worth it no matter how hard it is, because this is the greatest purpose in the world, to glorify the Creator. We go on. What does it mean to be good? Well, it means to be like God. Now, there's certain denominations or splits off of Christian that take it too far and say that we will become God. No, that's wrong. There's only one God, and he's God, and we aren't, because we are not eternal. He is. And yet, we need to be like him in that we are forgiving, we are compassionate, we are just, we are holy. It says, be just as he who called you is holy, be also holy in everything you do, for it is written, you shall be holy because I am holy. And see, all of this fits. It makes sense. And lastly, what's going to happen to us after we die? We're going to face the judgment. And those of us who have been called and have chosen and have followed Christ are going to be with him forever. It's beautiful. It makes sense. And from this flows, when we understand this, see, this is what I was going to say earlier. This whole time I've been being nagged in the back of my mind because I know I missed a point. People will say to me, prove to me there's a God. And I honestly believe you can, and this is why. The only life that makes sense is a life with the Christian God, the God of the Bible. Otherwise, there is no meaning, there is no purpose. And so people will come. I'm actually going to show you on the next slide. But what I want to convince you out of this is we live by faith, and God wants us to live by faith. And yet, without God, nothing makes sense. I mean, nothing makes sense. And yet we know within us that things are supposed to make sense. Everyone knows that they're supposed to be good, and yet they can't be good. And it points to Genesis 1, 2, and 3. So let's go to the next slide, and let's look at the atheist worldview, or the evolutionary worldview. And I want to show you how people don't live. People who are atheists fully do not live according to this. Thank God, or else things would be, they would make Hitler look like a choir boy. Where did we come from? Well, according to the atheist worldview, we are a cosmic accident, the random result of of matter, time, and chance. And that's what they worship. They worship matter, time, and chance. And, it's funny because it keeps changing. Aren't you glad that our story doesn't change, that God got it right at the beginning? And yet the science books keep changing. Because did you know, many people don't know this, but when your grandfather was in school, the Big Bang came from something the size of millions of miles across. There was a big something, and that big something exploded. And then in the time of your parents, that big something wasn't so big. When I was in school, it was a period on the page. You guys remember that? A period, something the size of this period. Well, guess how big it is now? It was nothing. And they call this science. Nothing exploded, and here we all are. And that's called science. And they say, it's funny, not to get too political, although I'm going to get a little political this evening, but, people say, oh, well, Christians live by faith, we live by science. There's nothing scientific at all about nothing exploding and randomly forming everything and that having purpose and chance with it. No, we believe in the beginning God, they believe in the beginning chance. We worship God, they worship chance. Evolutionism is not science, it is a religion. Them calling it science was brilliant, by the way. Evolutionism is Satan's masterpiece. It's brilliant. It would be like us, let's say that we were Buddhist and we wanted to make people feel really dumb if they didn't believe what we believe, so we convinced the world that Buddhism was mathematics. Don't you believe that 2 + 2 is 4? How can you not believe in what we believe? I mean, don't you believe in math? And that's what they say. Don't you believe in science? I believe in science. The word science in Latin, which is what it comes from, it means knowledge. That's why there's a science of sewing. There's a science of music. There's a science of any topic you want. There's a science of warfare. There's knowledge of that. Science is great. Evolutionism is not science. Do you know why they call it the missing link? Because it's still missing. It's still missing, folks. Okay, so where did we come from? Nothing. Accident. We are nothing but the result of time, chance, and matter. We are nothing but evolved pond scum. We are distant cousins with the roach, the pine tree, and the banana. That's what they really believe. Now, follow this. Yeah, it's not just that we are related to monkeys. No, every living thing, your great cousin is broccoli. And that's what they believe. Okay? Now, that's what they believe. And that's what your tax dollars go to teach, by the way. Okay? It's the greatest supported religious institution in here is the educational system that teaches secular humanism. Anyhow, check it out. Okay, where did we come from? Accident. So therefore, what's the purpose of life? Well, if you follow that, the purpose of life, there is no purpose. If it feels good, do it. Nothing ultimately matters. Now, you know what? Atheists, at some level they do, but they ultimately don't live that way because they live like there's a purpose. If they have kids, they want their kids to do something with their lives, to matter, to contribute. But that's a contradiction. Why? Because for them to function, they say there is no God, and then they hop into your worldview. And I tell them, stop stealing from my worldview. Live according to your own worldview. Goes on, what does it mean to be good? Good and morality in this worldview, if you're consistent, it does not exist. It is subjective, which means that there are people actually that now say that what Hitler did wasn't that bad. It just depends. And this is where you can get them. And it's not to win an argument, you're winning the person. But you say, was Hitler wrong? And they'll say, well, yeah. Why? That doesn't make sense to you. Hitler was a big fan of evolution. Darwin was one of the people who inspired him, and he saw himself as being a good evolutionist, getting rid of who he thought was the weaker species. He lived like a good atheist. And yet most atheists reject that. Why? It's a contradiction. And lastly, what's going to happen to me after I die? Nothing. You cease to exist. I'm glad that atheists really don't live according to this worldview, because if it is, it would be, which it's getting bad, but it's going to get a lot worse. But I just want you and I want our young people to understand Christian is not, I think there's certain branches of the church today that have thought that Christian is not we are against science and we're almost against reason and we just take it by blind faith. No, that's not Christianity. Christianity is the most logical, scientific, historical, mathematic, reasonable thing there is. It makes all the sense in the world because we look around us according to Psalm 19, Romans 1, and we see that there is a creator. There's no doubt. And we see within us that we have this desire to be good, but we can't do it. And we understand from divine revelation that it's because of the fall of mankind. And we understand that God is holy, therefore he must punish sin, yet he is loving, therefore he sent his son, just like he provided the ark, the flood to ruin the ancient world and the ark to save those who were called into that ark. Christ is our ark. It all makes sense. It's not blind faith. Historically, Christians used to be the scientists. They used to be the best artists. Right now, if you look up the best scientist ever, guess what? Almost always gets first place. If he doesn't, he gets second place. Sir Isaac Newton. Did you know that Sir Isaac Newton wrote more about the Bible than he did about science? Who's the guy that gets second place? Jared, do you know? The guy that did the motion. It wasn't Kepler. Kepler, who discovered planetary motion back in the, I don't know what century. He was a devout Christian. Both of those guys, by the way, aged the earth at about 4000 BC, the creation of the planet. Scientists. And they're still regarded as the greatest scientists that ever lived. Science and Christianity go hand in hand. All right, let's go to the next slide if we could. Okay, so I want you to see comments of atheists, and I want you to understand because we've lost the ability to think, we don't recognize this, and we need to recognize it. This is a man named Paul, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Bettany. He's an actor. And he says this, he says, Darwin was an atheist and so am I, but I don't think that makes me immoral. Okay? Now, most people hear that and they go, oh, okay, that's cute. But there's a stark contradiction. There's a logical fallacy in that statement. Can you pick it up? Darwin was an atheist and so am I, but I don't think that makes me immoral. If he's an atheist, there is no morality. There's no standard. What in the world does it mean to be moral? If he's right, it is subjective. That means each of us is God in the sense that I can say, no, this is moral. It's moral to rob and to kill. Contradiction. And we need to recognize that. It's like Ronald Reagan's son had an ad. He's a devout atheist. The apple fell very far from the tree. I can't think of his name. Is it Ron? Is he a junior? Okay. And maybe you've seen this commercial. It's just a knife in my heart when I see it. But he talks about how he stands up for atheist rights, and he always ends it by saying, I'm not afraid of burning in hell. It's just very, very stark. Have you guys seen that at all? It's very, very, it's just sad. But he says this, he goes, I'm an atheist, and I believe that my atheist rights need to be represented, and that I have rights as an atheist, and Christians need to this and that. And people hear that, and they go, oh, okay, well, yeah, atheist rights. But there's a glaring contradiction there. In an atheist worldview, guess what? There are no rights. Because there's no morality, there's no truth. How in the world can there be rights? And this is where Christians need to learn how to think. And our children, you know what breaks my heart more than anything is when wonderful Christian young people go out into the world and they get duped by the enemy. You know, right now we're losing about 75 to 85% of our young people. They're raised in the church, they leave by their second year of college, or around that same age they walk away from the faith. Why? Because they aren't prepared to recognize the schemes of the enemy and go, I'm not going to get fooled. I'm not going to fall for that one. This is where we need to learn how to think. We need to understand. We need apologetic instruction. Let's go to the next one, and let me show you a consistent atheist worldview. Richard Dawkins, you guys know this guy. Much as we might wish to believe otherwise, universal love and the welfare of the species as a whole are concepts which simply do not make evolutionary sense. Now, that is a consistent bravo to Richard Dawkins, because that makes sense, right? He's actually living according to it. Are things getting bad? They're getting bad because our society is embracing. Look, when you turn to God as a people and embrace his ways, and he blesses you with a great nation, and then, this is just like Israel in the Old Testament, and then generations down the road, you abandon God, there's going to be consequences. Things are going to get bad in this nation. Things are bad, and I think they might get worse. Pizza man just tried to come in that door. Please, run. Come on, Todd, go after him. Things are getting bad in this nation, and I'm not a prophet, but I think that they might get worse. Maybe some of you agree. Let me just encourage you with this. God always keeps a remnant. He always keeps a remnant, and you are that remnant, and our children are that remnant. I met Nathan right here. What's your last name? And talked to him about his vision for his life. He introduced me. They weren't here, but he told me about his sisters. God's going to keep a remnant right there. That man's going to do great things for God. There's nothing but hope. Our forefathers and foremothers, they've been through all kinds of, in the past, all kinds of hardships, and they survived. God is going to bring judgment on this nation, and we pray for mercy, but he's gonna bring judgment, and yet he is faithful to preserve his people. Elijah cried out and said, God, I'm the last one, just let me die. And what did God say back to him? I have reserved for myself 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. God is going to reserve a people in this nation. Those people, if they're going to be that faithful remnant, they have to know how to think. They have to know how to understand. They have to recognize, it says in the Word of God that we are not unaware of the devil's schemes, but sometimes I think we are. Because he is very, very good. When it says in the Lord's Prayer, deliver me from the evil one of the interpretations of that is, don't let me go toe-to-toe with the enemy. Because he is very, very good at what he does. He is very, very good at what he does, and we need to understand his schemes. Let's go to the next slide if we could. So we need to understand subjective morality versus objective morality. Subjective morality is whatever you think, whatever your opinions are. If you think that's wrong, okay, for you that's wrong. For me, I don't think that's wrong. Friends, subjective morality does not exist in the kingdom of God. It is objective because this is the standard. I can remember I was listening to an interview or a Q&A, and it was with Ravi Zacharias, I believe. And this man stood up and he goes, I don't believe in God. And Ravi said, and I love Ravi. I really learned from him just how to, like I said, not want to win an argument, but win a person. And he's just so gracious. And he served, he fulfilled his purpose, and that's why God took him home. But the man stood up and he goes, I don't believe in God. And Ravi said, okay, why? And he goes, because if there was a God, there wouldn't be so much evil in the world. Did you catch the contradiction? Right? Are you starting to get it? Whoa, evil. And Ravi said something along these lines. He said, wait, so you believe there's evil? And the man said, sure. And Ravi said, therefore, do you also believe there's good? And the man thought and he goes, yes. And Ravi said, for there to be good and evil, don't you think there needs to be a standard above us and outside of us from which we can get that concept of good and evil? And the man said, yes, I think there is. And he goes, don't you think for there to be a concept of good outside of us, it needs to be eternal? And the man was like, I think so. And Ravi said, what was your question? And the guy's like, yeah, my question shows that I'm not knowing how to think. So God is about objective fact. Why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because more and more I experience a Christianity where people, it says in this book that God made us in his image. There are wonderful people today in wonderful places like this who are attempting to make God in their image. They say, God, this is the kind of God I want you to be. I want you to like this stuff and don't like this stuff. I want you to approve of this in my life. Our God is not the kind of God that says, okay, tell me what kind of God you want me to be, and I'll change to fit that mold. God does not change. He is immutable. And God doesn't need to change. Amen? Who needs to change? We do. Friends, this is what it means to have a biblical worldview. It means that, well, two things. Let me give you two things it means. First thing it means is this. It means if God handed you, imagine that God handed you the Bible and he handed you a pen. And he said, son, daughter, I want you to take that pen. I'm God, I've got all the time, I'll wait. And I want you to go through and mark out what you want me to change. And you can add what you want me to change, anything you want. Well, there are many people today who call themselves Christians that be like, sit down, God. This is going to take a while. This is like Christmas. Awesome. All right, let's go here where it talks about men being the head of the household. I've been waiting a long time. Cross that out. Let's see. Let's go back over here. This thing about male and female. I really don't like that. And a hell. I just don't know if I like that. And also, I'm going to add this because I just think it'd be great if I got $1 million. I don't know, whatever. And then I'm going to do this here. A biblical worldview is God handing you the Bible and a pen and saying, change whatever you want to. And in fear and trembling, you hand it back and you say, God, you did it perfectly. There is not one dot, what's the word? Tittle that I could change. There's nothing in this I could change. Friends, God didn't just do it 99.9% right. He did it perfectly. And whenever I look at part of God's word and I go, oh, I just don't like that, what I'm beginning, the Holy Spirit faithfully is waking me up saying, if you don't like it, then you're the problem. This isn't the problem. Amen? God is not the problem. Let me tell you what else it means to have a biblical worldview. And now, this is a process, so don't let the enemy pour judgment on you. Let the Holy Spirit encourage you. To have a biblical worldview means people come up to you and they say, can I ask you a question? Why do you act the way you act? Say, well, let me show you. It's right here. How come you speak the way you speak? I never hear you tear people down. You only build them up. Well, that'd be Ephesians 4:29. Why do you dress the way you dress? How come you do family the way you do? I've observed you and your wife. How come you raise your children the way you do? Why do you, every area of your life, how come you spend your time, your money the way you do? And in every area of our life, we should be able to look at this book and back it up. That's what it means to have a biblical worldview. Does that make sense? Friends, we don't idolize this. We worship God, but this is God's word. He has given it to us, and it is powerful. I believe the only hope for the remnant, and, well, this is what will make the remnant the remnant. The best thing we can instill in our children is to endeavor to walk according to this without compromise. That's what it means to have a biblical worldview. It's objective. It's based on fact. Okay, now we're going to transition. Oh, by the way, at the end of this, I'm going to open up for questions and comments. So as you're going through this, if you have a question or comment, please hold on to it. And you can just jump right in any time and say it. It's not a big deal. Okay, let's go to the next slide if we could. And we're going to transition to what effect has evolution had on Western culture. Because our children, as Christians, we need to understand that this isn't just something that's annoying. This is something that has transformed the world in a bad, bad way. And I'm just going to scratch the surface. Okay? You ready? Here we go. Let me introduce you to some of the fathers of evolutionary philosophy. Okay? You know, we have the founding fathers. When you think of the founding fathers, you think of Jefferson, you think of Adams, you think of Franklin. Well, these are the founding fathers of modern America, of the United States of entertainment, of the United States of socialism, whatever word you want to use. These men are some of the most read in colleges. The one in the bottom left is assigned more than anyone else. His books are assigned more than anyone else. Now, you know who these are. The guy on the top left is Charles Darwin. I do have to say, though, I really admire these guys' facial hair. Huh? Have a stash like that? I think it'd be a great idea. See, Pastor Stu has the facial hair. I think Pastor Jason needs to grow a stash like that. Just a little challenge, loving challenge. You take it or leave it, man. Take it or leave it. All right, so let me just talk about these guys. Charles Darwin, right there, he said, I do not believe in the Bible as a divine revelation and therefore not in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. Studying these men is fascinating. When you study Charles Darwin, what you'll find out is that as a young man, so there's a young man right here. Tell me your name. Robert, how old are you? That's what I thought, 12 years old. When Charles Darwin was Robert's age, he wanted to join the church. And he wanted to preach the Bible. And he believed in this book. But he had a grandfather named Erasmus Darwin, which was an evolutionist. See, evolutionism existed. Darwin's the one that made it very, very popular. and he led his grandson astray. And Darwin concluded, follow this, that the first 11 chapters of the Bible were wrong. The first 11 chapters of the Bible were wrong. False history. And there's quotes on him in other presentations. It's in the Worldview series that I have on him, where he looked at creation, he looked at the flood, he looked at the Tower of Babel, and he goes, that's wrong. And therefore he concluded rightly, if the first 11 chapters, what would that be? That'd be just the first few pages. If this is wrong, then all this is wrong. And guess what? He's right. If the first 11 chapters of this book are wrong, forget it. It's all wrong. You can't trust it. That's how important Genesis is. That's why these ministries like Institute for Creation Research, Answers in Genesis, I think are vital. And I think they're a gift from God. That's my personal persuasion. Karl Marx, whose name wasn't well known, but now is it well known? It's the most assigned author in our college system today. He said, my object in life is to dethrone God. I'm sorry, what'd you say? Yeah, good luck, buddy. It's how do you think it turned out for him? Not that well. Now, usually I don't do this, but I'm going to finish the quote because you see it as ... He went on to say this, my object in life is to dethrone God and destroy capitalism. Now, capitalism is a very, it's getting to be, unfortunately, a very debated concept. Many people don't even know what capitalism is. Let me give you a dictionary definition. Capitalism is a form of market philosophy where instead of the government owning business, individuals own businesses. That's capitalism. So, people say to me, like there's a guy now in my church who has been influenced by certain things, dear brother, and he said, I just don't think I'm a big fan of capitalism. He owns his own business. His wife owns her own business. And he's a great guy. And I think what he's saying is, I'm not a big fan of greed. Well, yeah, sure. But would you rather have the government owning your business, or would you rather own your business? Trucking company, which one? Do you want Uncle Sam owning it, or do you want to own it? Yeah, exactly, yeah. That's all it is. Now, tangent, but I'm just going to do it real quick. Why did he want to dethrone God and destroy capitalism? Because he had a philosophy where the government was God. And if God is God, follow this. If God is God, then Genesis 1:26, where he said, let us make man in our image and let them have dominion, is true. And therefore he can say, I'm going to make you a steward of a trucking company. Rule it well and make it a Christian, God-honoring company, right? Marx didn't like that. He said, no, I want the government to be God because I want to destroy capitalism. Therefore, he saw capitalism and God as somewhat of a package deal, where private ownership and people choose. Another quick tangent, and then I'll come back. And I know this might be stepping on some people's toes, but I'm just going to share my personal perspective. The great battle today is not a battle of political parties. It's a battle of ideas, and ultimately, it's God's ways versus the enemy's ways. It's a spiritual battle. And people use emotionally charged reasoning. They'll say, well, don't you want to share? Marxism, socialism, it's about sharing. No, sharing is when you own something, it's yours, you aren't forced to share it, but because you love, you say, this is mine, I'm sharing it with you. That's sharing. By definition, if it's forced, it's not sharing. And that's what socialism is. It's you don't have a choice. I am taking everything or a big part of what you have, and I'm giving it to them in the name of charity. That's forced. It's not sharing. Does that make sense? If you look in this book from cover to cover, you will see that God cares a lot about people having private ownership, and in that ownership, sharing with their brethren with a generous heart. See, people think that Christianity or that the Bible doesn't address politics. Friends, we believe in the doctrine of the all-sufficiency of this book. It addresses everything under the sun. The best thing this country can do, as it was founded on, is to walk according to principles found in this book. Okay, tangent, I'm done. God is dead. You've heard that. That's what inspired the movie God is Not Dead. Friedrich Nietzsche. Many people don't know that Nietzsche ended the last 14 years of his life in a mental insane asylum because he realized that the society, Western society, was abandoning God. This was in the end of the 1800s. And he looked into the 1900s, the 20th century, within which most of us were born, and he predicted that the 20th century would be the bloodiest century in the history of the world. And guess what? he was right. And he could not conceive of a society, even though he wasn't a Christian, of a society that did not believe in God. And he went crazy the last 14 years of his life. All right, let's go to the next slide if we could. French Revolution. Remember, we're talking about results of evolutionism. French Revolution worshipped man's reason. And their big thing was, we don't need God. We have our own brains. Forget God's word. We can figure this out on our own. And it ended up being the death of 50,000 innocent men, women, and children. It was the mobs on the street. Is this sounding familiar? It was the mobs on the street. And it was bad, and it was evil, and it was wrong, and it came about because they abandoned God. And guess what? If you don't know history, those who don't know history are doomed to what? Repeat it. It's going to happen in this nation. Mob mentality is coming to this nation because that's what happens when you abandon God. Scary stuff. Their cry was liberty, equality, fraternity. Let me tell you about, I would love to take time to talk about all those words, but let me talk about equality because it's a word that's very misunderstood and it's used wrongly. The enemies of God understand the power of words, and they use these words to manipulate people. Let me tell you what God's word says about equality, that we are equal under his law. And you could even apply it to law in a human sense. What does that mean? It means that everyone should be judged under the law equally, whether they're rich or poor, whatever beautiful shade of skin God gave them, male and female, everyone is equal under the law. Does that make sense? That is what equality by God is all about. If I break the law, I'm judged according to the law. If this man breaks the law and he's rich, it doesn't matter. He's judged according to the law. If he stole from me, it doesn't matter if he's the king's son. He's judged according to the law. David found out about this when what he did with Uriah the Hittite. And he found out, no, he is equally judged under the law. What people think equality is today is that we should all be equal in the sense of status, in the sense of everything. Guess what? That's impossible. It can't happen. Because even if you gave everyone the same house, the same square footage, the same income, it sounds horrible. It sounds like a bad dream. You can't make everyone equal in the sense that you have talents that the person next to you doesn't have. You're born with, some of you are born musically gifted, athletically gifted. We can't all be equal. And guess what? Newsflash, God didn't create us to be equal in that way. We're supposed to be a body. Okay, let's go on. Comparing that with the American Revolution, for the sake of time, I'm just going to go on, but let me just say they weren't the same. They were extremely different. The French Revolution was inspired by evolutionism. American Revolution was very honoring to God. Next slide. Okay, I want to talk about the Titanic and the Burgoyne. All of you have heard of the Titanic. I'm guessing maybe none of you have heard of the Burgoyne because these were two very similar events. One of them was characterized by a biblical worldview. The other one was not. We go to the Titanic. I keep forgetting I can look back there. Titanic, the cry was given, women and children first. Guess what? Women and children first. Does that make any evolutionary sense? Evolutionary sense, only the strong survive. It's survival of the who? The fittest. Guess what? When Muslims have a ship going down, the men get on the lifeboats and watch the women and children sink. Good evolutionist, right? Even though they believe in a God, but it's not the one true God, obviously. The cry was given, women and children first. There was a sinking 50 years before this on the Birkenhead where that started. I don't have time to go into that. 1,500 people died. 90% was men. The richest men, and guess what? Many of the men who died were not Christian, but they were raised in a biblical worldview. They were raised in a Christian society, and they knew how to be men. Check this out. There was a discussion as the Titanic was sinking as to what constituted a man. What age? Now, think if that was asked today. They say now that adolescence goes till 27 is now the latest scientific report. It's just going to keep getting higher and higher. Give men permission to stay in their basements and play video games and do stuff like that and not get a job and provide and be men. But guess what they came up with as the ship was sinking? 13 years old. If you're about 13 years old, my son Isaiah, stand up, Isaiah. You guys look. There's a 13-year-old man. He's going to say afterwards, why'd you make me stand up? Because you're handsome. Sit back down. He would have gone down with the ship. There were 60 cabin boys on the Titanic. They were poor boys who were making an opportunity to get to the New World. They were hired on as cabin boys. They were all 16 years old. Not one of them survived, and not one of them had to be restrained. They stood back and they played the role of men because they understood what it meant to be men. The World War II generation, which is almost gone, I think is the last good handful of men. We have a community, a nation today that has many males but few men. Would you agree? You know what's sad? I'm just going to say it. We have a church today in this country that has many males but not that many men. We need to resurrect. Friends, we need to, as it says in Jeremiah, maybe chapter 6, we need to seek out the ancient paths. We need to find the way that's good and walk in it. We need to understand that things used to be different and they were better in the realm of people's understanding. John Jacob Astor, richest man in the world. Richest man in the world. His wife was either pregnant or had a newborn, I'm not sure. And on the last lifeboat, the last seat, they said, all of the women and children have been on, they said, Mr. Astor, you have to get on this lifeboat. So much depends on you. I mean, thousands of people's jobs are dependent on you. He was in his 20s, richest man in the world. They said, you have to get on this boat. And he said, okay, I'll get on it. And just then they came and they found a woman they had missed. She was a third-class, poor woman who was just hired to serve as a maid. And he stood back and he goes, put her on. And he was found floating in the ice fields. Now, why did they do that? Because they had a biblical worldview. The chivalric code of men giving up their lives for women and children, that is only birthed out of Christianity. Because Jesus gave his life for the bride. He laid down his life for the weaker, who at the time didn't even deserve it. That's the chivalric code. Now, let's go to the next slide and let me tell you about the Burgoyne. 726 people. There are crewmen, men, women, children. Only 173 people survived. Over half of them were crew. 62 were traveling men. 1 woman survived out of 100. All the children out of 50 died. They were harpooning the women and children off of the lifeboats. Why? Because these were the children and grandchildren of the French Revolution. And they had been taught that there is no God. And they had been taught that it's about the survival of the fittest. They had been trained to reason without God, to lean on their own understanding. The same circumstance, two completely different results. Why? Because of worldview. And once again, you can be a Christian and not have a complete biblical worldview, and therefore for the men in here not play the part of men, and for the women not play the part of women. Isn't that sad? And France was ashamed. They were mocked and ridiculed by the whole world at that time. And I bet that none of you have heard of this. Why? Because no one wants to point this stuff out. It's the forgotten history. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to have to wrap this up with a pretty bow. I don't want to take up too much y'all's time. Textbooks, school textbooks, let's talk about those and how evolution has impacted those. Here's a man, you might recognize him. His name's Adolf Hitler. Guess what? They show his picture now on streets and kids don't know who he is. And when I say kids, I mean 16 years old, 18, 20 years old. He said, let me control the textbooks and I will control the state. You know why he said that? Because he was brilliant. Evil, but he was brilliant. If not for his arrogance and the sovereignty of God, he might have achieved his dream and we'd all be speaking German right now. Let me control the textbooks and I will control the state. Do you think he might be onto something? Let's go to the next slide. Let's look at the textbooks of today. Evolution, what the fossils say and why it matters. Your sensor should be going off. Wait. Why it matters? Nothing matters. Quit stealing from my worldview, evolutionist. And that's what I want to help you guys do is when these things come, you go, it's like, it's like an alarm goes off. You're like, wait, stop. Contradiction, falsity, doesn't make sense. Let me show you, has anyone here heard of the New England Primer? It was the school textbook before and at the founding of this country in the colonies. Let me show you how your great-great-great-grandfather and grandmother learned their ABCs. Let's go to the next slide. In Adam's fall, we sinned all. Heaven defined, the Bible mind. Christ crucified, for sinners died. The deluge drowned the earth around. Elijah hid, by ravens fed. The judgment made, Felix afraid. That's how they learned their ABCs. I would encourage you, go onto Amazon. Every Christian home needs one of these books. You can still get them today. There's these little blue books, and they are it will blow your mind. You will read through it and almost weep, knowing this used to be the textbook in the public school system, because it goes through and it quotes. I mean, it's all about God, and it answers questions. It has catechisms in it, and it's beautiful. And yet Satan knows, and so he infiltrated. By the way, I just want to give a plug. If you're into films, get the documentary Agenda. I know Pastor Jason and his wife have seen the first one. There's an Agenda 1 and 2. It'll just really, really be good for your children and grandchildren to get a hold of that. So it's affected our textbooks. Let's go to the next slide. Effects of evolution in the last 100 years. Eugenics. Any of you ever heard of the eugenics movement? Did you know that back in the 1930s, the governments, state governments like Virginia in this country, were taking poor people and black people and against their will sterilizing them so they couldn't have children? They were doing that because of evolution, because of Margaret Sanger. And guess who across the big ocean in Europe saw this and thought, that's a great idea, and inculcated in his strategy? Adolf Hitler. Evolutionism is bad. Abandoning God is a big deal. And friends, just because, once again, I don't want you to think, oh, well, I'm good because I'm a Christian. Well, you're on the better side of the tracks because you're a Christian, but you can still think like an evolutionist, and many Christians do. God's the judge whether they're Christian or not, but they call themselves Christians, and they think this way. And let me just say, at some point, all of us are still thinking. At some point, it's infiltrated us. Okay? All right, let's keep going. Effects of evolution these last 100 years. Let's go to the next slide. That's Stalin. You guys know him? That's Stalin. 20th century is the bloodiest century in the history of this world. In the 20th century, within which most of us were born, between 150 to 250 million innocent people, these aren't soldiers, innocent people were murdered in the name of communism. In China, Russia, Stalin killed 60 million of his own people. The largest slave labor force in the history of the world was Russia in the 1950s by Stalin. He had 16 million slaves at any given time. No, Russians. Just Russians. I mean, some of them might have been Jews, but basically he couldn't feed his country because communism doesn't work. So he went to slave labor. And I mean, it was crazy. A great book that you can read, it's called Stalin. It's by the author Albert Marin, M-A-R-R-I-N. It'll blow your socks off. Every Christian, every American needs to read that book. Something that's tragic, the way it went down, is after World War II, you don't meet too many Nazis today because we denazified Europe. We went through and we had the trials and we just denazified Europe. There's some crazy people out in the woods that are still claiming that, but we did not de-KGB Russia because at the end, they became our allies. And Churchill was waving his flag saying, this isn't good. We need Stalin's help, but this isn't good. And he talked about the Iron Curtain. You hear about the stories of Richard Wurmbrand. Have any of you heard of Richard Wurmbrand? The book Tortured for Christ, maybe. There's a movie called Tortured for Christ. He was persecuted. He was a Romanian Christian. He was persecuted under Hitler and then persecuted under communism. He said Nazism was a piece of cake. Communism was horrible. It was horrible. And that's the new unofficial political party in this country is communism. And they want to make us communists. And they have to be ignorant of this. Look at that man right there about to be shot looking at the camera. If the camera snapped again a second later, he's dead. Why? Was he guilty of a crime? No. No. Stalin said, people are the problem. Get rid of people and you get rid of the problem. That was his philosophy. Okay. All right, next slide. We have a few more, and then I'm going to cut this talk short. Feminism. The goal of feminism is to convince, listen, feminism, I was teaching in a private school one time, substitute teaching, and I said the word feminist, and this one sweet 16-year-old girl, she goes, feminism, woo! And I said, sorry, I'm losing my voice. And I said, are you a feminist? And she goes, well, I think so. And I said, well, what's a feminist? And she goes, well, it's someone who cares about women. I said, no, sweetheart, that's not a feminist, that's a Christian. The best religion that exalts women. Listen, sisters, let me just tell you, according to God's word, you are the apex of creation because God made us men and it wasn't good enough, and you are the finishing jewel of creation. Did you know that? God broke me in half, and only together with that beautiful woman in the back am I made whole. The first "it is not good" in Scripture was God looking at creation saying, wait. There's one thing. It's not good for men to be alone. The mountains weren't good enough, the stars, the animals. There was one thing, and it was you. Christianity, the most blessed woman in the world is the Christian woman, especially the Christian woman who embraces her role as a woman, a wife, and a mother. There is no woman more blessed than the Christian homemaker, if that's what she's called to do. Now, feminism hates God. They hate women. They hate men. They hate God's purpose for women and men. They hate families. And this is their goal, to convince women that marriage is slavery and motherhood a burden. Let me quote Sheila Cronin, a leading feminist. Let me see if I can do this. She said, "Since marriage constitutes slavery for women, the only reasonable way forward for the feminist movement is to destroy marriage. Whatever its ultimate meaning, we must destroy the family, the nuclear family." Okay? They hate family. Why? Because they hate God. Now, I just want to give you my opinion. I think each of us in here, myself included, have some level of feminism in our veins because it's so rampant. It's everywhere. And it's okay. We just need to confess that and detox it and get it out because it's bad. It's very, very deceitful. I was at a Black Lives Matter meeting. I didn't go to the rally, but I went to the information meeting. And they were asking, does anyone have any questions? And they gave a presentation, and I asked one question. I said, yeah, I have a question. I'm very confused because I believe that Black Lives Matter, and I believe that God created us all in his image. And because I believe that Black Lives Matter, I did research to find the top 3 leading deaths for black people. And the leading death by far is abortion. Only 50% of black babies make it out of the womb alive. That should be the safest place for a black person, for any person, should be the womb. 50% of them don't make it out alive. That's not by mistake, by the way, that they only make 13% of the population, and yet 60+% of the abortions are black people. Think about that. 13% of the population gets the majority of the abortions. Why? Because they're targeted. Because of true racism, which is the people who run those institutes. So abortion. Secondly, gangs, violence. And thirdly, domestic violence. Police brutality is nowhere on that spectrum. It's like number 254 reasons why black people suffer and die. And I said, so as a Christian man, I looked at these 3 things that are killing my black fellow Americans, brothers and sisters, and I found a cure in God's word for all 3 of them. It's the same cure. It's not passing laws, even though passing laws against abortion would be great and this and that. But there's a cure in God's word that would fix abortion, gang violence, domestic violence. Guess what it is? It's the renewal of the biblical family. It's having the nuclear family established where you have a man who takes up the role of protector, provider, and shepherd of his family, a woman who has his back, and they raise up kids to the glory of God. And guess what? Black America used to do that. They used to have strong families, and I'm going to get into a tangent, so I'll just regress, and they had some kind of answer for that. But friends, feminism hates, the reason I was saying that is because I said, so I see that what black America needs is they need the renewal of the family. They need dads. They need husbands and mothers together. And then I go to blacklivesmatter.com and I look under the purpose statement. It says, we want to destroy the nuclear family. Why is that? And they had nothing that even resembled a good reason, of course. Feminism's bad. It is bad news. I want to share with you a story about this, and I want you to focus on this, and we'll wrap up in a couple slides. To convince women that marriage is slavery and that motherhood is a burden. Okay? I see more and more girls looking less like girls and more like boys. And that's not a judgment on them. It's just an outward sign that there might be something going on inside. I'm not judging them. Especially when I go into the big cities, though, I see girls who have haircuts like mine, minus the balding, okay? And I'm not saying that makes them evil. I'm not saying that, God looks at the heart, but I'm saying what that does show me, just like when I meet someone who has all kinds of graffiti on his body and all kinds of stuff, I don't judge him for that, but it shows me maybe there's something on the inside that's going on. Does that make sense? And I was talking to this young woman who's very, very dear to me. This was about 3 years ago because she hasn't talked to me since. And she had a haircut like mine, and I'm sad to say she had a beard like mine. And I told her, I said, sweetheart, God made you a beautiful girl. God made you a woman, and being a woman is awesome. And unless he calls you to be single, he wants you to get married and have kids. And she looked at me, and this is what I want you to understand. She said, Jared, if that's God's will for me to be a wife and a mother, I'd rather shoot myself in the head. Now, why did she say that? Because she had been convinced through media, through Hollywood, through everything else, that being a mom is second class and being a wife is slavery. That's why fewer people are getting married. Did you know that? Fewer people are getting married, fewer people are having children. 43% of people, fewer are having children, and the same is getting married. It's getting more and more rare. Now, this is what I want you to understand. You need to understand this because it's very, very important so you can recognize what's going on. A girl, when she's 6, 7, or 8, people won't say these words to her, but she'll pick it up through osmosis. That's how powerful culture is. She will pick up through osmosis that being a mom, being a wife isn't where it's at. Does that make sense? Then when she hits about 10, 11, 12, 13, her body will start to change. It'll start to mature and bloom, right? Now, and I'm saying this with reverence and seriousness, I'm a big fan of the female body. I'm glad that God made my wife. Men, can I get an amen? Okay. God made women awesome. And he made them physically with everything they need to fulfill an amazing role as a wife and an amazing role as a mother. I mean, think about what a female body can do. It can develop a human being. It can grow a human being and then bring the human being into the world. I can't do that. And not just that, but then it can feed the human being. Score. Easier on the budget, right? Can feed the human being for 9 months, a year. If you're a hippie, 3 years, 4 years, can feed that baby. What I usually tell people is, in my opinion, not to judge, if the baby can walk to you and in perfect grammar say it's time for my milk, it might be time to just move on. But follow me, the female body is, and once again I'm saying this in sanctified language, it's beautiful and it's amazing in the context of marriage and motherhood. But the young girl's convinced that being a wife and a mom is slavery. And when she sees her body transform, she sees this body that has tools for function in womanhood and wifehood, in motherhood. What does she do? She loathes, hates, and resents her very physical body. Isn't that tragic? When it's the most beautiful creation God ever made, and she resents it. And so what does she do? She suppresses, she changes, she recognizes just in her DNA that her hair is a covering, a sign of, being under that man one day, and she just gets rid of it all. That's why you see those girls. Does that make sense? It's because of the worldview. It's because they've been convinced of lies. It's because Satan is a liar, and his lies are powerful. When people believe the lies, it's just as powerful as if it were true. And it's happening to our daughters. And not only, we live in a nation today that's raising masculine girls and feminine boys. And we live in a church that more and more is raising masculine girls and feminine boys. This might be a radical, controversial statement, but I'm going to say it with all authority. We need to raise masculine boys according to this word and feminine girls according to this word, because that's what God made us to be in the beginning, male and female. Okay? Not masculinity according to Hollywood, but masculinity and femininity, which is one of the hardest words to say, according to this book. All right, let's wrap this up with a pretty bow. I'm not going to do the last section. Let's just do, I think there's a couple more. If you go to the next slide. Adolescence, okay, just really quick. Evolutionism. Before the year 1900, you were a baby, a young child, and then real quickly you became an adult. What were your great-great-grandparents doing when they were 12 years old? They were working, they were responsible, they were disciplined, they knew how to sit still. Now it's hard to get a 30-year-old sometime to act that way. It's not because of evolution. It's not because we evolved or devolved into kids that never grow up. It's because we underestimate our children because of adolescence thinking. There's a man named G. Stanley Hall. He was a contemporary of Charles Darwin. In the year 1901, he coined the phrase adolescence. It never existed before. My grandfather, my dad's dad, believe it or not, You're going to think I'm older than I am. He was born, my dad's dad, Billy Dodd, he was born in 1902. He died in 2001. Think about that. Think about how the world changed. He went from covered wagons to putting people on the moon, all this kind of stuff. But guess what? He was never a teenager. Because the word teenager wasn't invented until he was in his 30s, because it was in the 1930s. It's okay to use the word, but I just want you to understand, this is where we need to figure this out. We need to look back and learn this kind of stuff. The word teenager came about because for the first time since Adam and Eve, kids weren't acting like adults. And parents were perplexed. They're like, well, my daddy and my granddad and my mom and grandmom, they acted this way, and he's 15 and he still won't act like a man. Now he's just a teenager. The word teenager, if you look it up on dictionary.com, it began in the 1930s. Isn't that fascinating? All right, let's go to the next slide. So just the point on that last one is we need to expect our children, we need to stop underestimating what our children are capable of. They're capable to sit right here and listen to the Word of God. They're able to pray to God. They're able to grow. They're able to be mature. They're able to work hard. They're able to be given responsibility and be entrusted with responsibility. Our forefathers at 10 years old were running the farm. Guess what Alexander Hamilton was doing when he was 12 years old? You're 12, right? Robert's age. He was running a business in the island of St. Croix in 2 different languages. It's not because he was a brilliant man like Robert is. It's because that's what was expected. People were capable because they believed they could be. It was expected of them. Okay. Let's wrap this up with a pretty bow. I've been saying that for like 20 minutes. Okay. You guys know who that is? Margaret Sanger, who in my opinion is the most evil woman, who is responsible for more deaths than any other woman in the history of the world. Let me tell you what she said. Hordes of people are born who live, yet who have done absolutely nothing to advance the race one iota. Their lives are hopeless repetitions. Such human weeds clog up the path, drain up the energies and resources of this little earth. We must clear the way for a better world. We must cultivate our garden. The most merciful thing that a family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. And she is the founder of Planned Parenthood. She hated black people. She hated poor people. And she was the one that brought about the eugenics movement I talked about earlier, where they sterilized people. You know, that happened as late as 2010, 11. Because they have people that are on welfare and they say, we won't continue your benefits unless we sterilize you. And they say, okay. Crazy stories. All right, I think the next slide will be my last slide because it's the end of the transition. Okay. Yeah, let's just stop there. Okay, so actually, I just got to share this one with you because you're going to find this funny. How has evolution affected the arts? That's Rembrandt, beautiful painting. If you go to Europe, don't go to art museums over here. Sorry, unless they're just really exceptions to the rule. Don't go to modern art museums. Go to old art, and you'll see them inspired by Christianity, and they're full of life. Let me show you modern art on the next slide. That's real. It's modern art. There's one I could have put up. It's blue. It sold for $40 million. It's blue canvas. You go to modern art, it's like there's a circle, there's a line, there's a thing, and somehow that's really deep. Why? Because when you don't have God in your mind, there's no beauty. There's nothing. Okay. Forgive me because I know this talk went a little long, but that's definitely sufficient. The point of all of this is, let me try and give you a summary, then we'll open up for Q&A real quick. The point of this is, in my opinion, we have a church today that has forgotten how to think. We have a church today, we have an upcoming generation of Christian children who are going to be chewed up and spit out by this world unless we as families in the church equip them on how to think and understand. We need to give them the apologetic instruction. We need to give them the history. Let me ask you this. Are the enemies of God trying to pervert history? Why? Why? Because it's powerful. Something I gave a talk this last week at the Black Hills, South Dakota, and it was to a group of about 30 young men, all ages 12 to 25. And one thing I challenged them with is you need to learn how to think, and you need to be historians. Oh, hey, can you bring up the C.S. Lewis slide, please? It'll be the last slide, I promise. You need to be historians, apologists, and theologians. Historians, apologists, and theologians. That's what we need. And guess what? This young man, Robert, without going to some building somewhere, seminary, that he can be a theologian, he can be a historian, he can be an apologist. He just needs a little bit of the right resources, especially the Word of God, and taught how to think, and he can change the world along with his sisters. Okay, we'll end with this. This is one of our heroes in our family, C.S. Lewis. This is a man who is still teaching me from the grave how to think through his writing. And I want to share this quote with you because it's beautiful. I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun is risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. Take time to just take that in. I believe in Christianity in the same way I believe in the sun. Not only because I can see it, but because by it I see everything else. Does that make sense? You know, the sun, we believe in the sun because we can see it, but the cool thing about the sun is that by its light, I can see the tree, and I can see you, and everything is clear. Christianity, you see it. It's right there. It makes all the sense in the world. But not only is it clear, and Christ is right there, and he's clear, and I see him, I can look in his eyes, but by the light of Christ, I can see everything else if he'll open my eyes and teach me. Any issue, we can see it, and it all makes sense. Family makes sense. Literature makes sense. History makes sense. Science makes sense. Legislation makes sense in light of Christianity. It's not just a Wednesday and Sunday thing. It's 24/7. It's every area of our life, every way of our thinking. Trust in the Lord with all your, and lean not on your own understanding. In how many of your ways? In all your ways, acknowledge God, and he will make your path straight. We learned that in Sunday school when we were little kids. But friends, that's it. To trust in the Lord. He knows what's right, not the experts. He knows what's right. And if we will lean not on our own understanding, but in every area of our life, say, God, what do you think about that? What does God say about that? What does his word, this all-sufficient book, tell us about any given topic? We will overcome, and we will be the remnant. My heart for you, and I mean this, I'm not just saying this, I love you guys. I love this church. And friends, I want us to win. I want us to stand together at the gates to the celestial city and embrace each other saying, we won. We finished the race. And to look behind us, and there's our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and we're there, and we overcame because by the grace of God, we could see. It's the vision we need. Let's pray, and then I'm going to open it up. Father God, thank you so much for your word. Thank you that by your word we can see all things. Thank you, God, that your word is enough. Thank you, God, that you are all powerful and sovereign. Father, I pray for these wonderful sons and daughters of the kingdom of God, that they would overcome, that they would be found worthy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of his testimony, and that they would stand before you one day and hear the words, well done and faithful servant. God, help us to think properly in your kingdom. Help us to think like Christians.